So capitalist realism, or this idea that the economy has us trapped, dominates us politically. Sometimes it's overt and explicit, but sometimes it is only revealed through implication. For instance, when Judith Butler worried that a return to class politics would mean centering the voices of white men, she inadvertently revealed that she thought a fundamental change to our economic structure was impossible. She must fundamentally agree with conservatives like Roger Scruton.
To be a conservative is to be, at best, a reluctant capitalist. You have to acknowledge, as I do, the need for the free market for a priori grounds. Without it, there is no serious economy, but it has to be tempered, obviously.
Socialist politics have stalled out. When socialism is raised as a possibility, people conceive of it in terms of state spending, as an expansion of the welfare state, or as an expansion of state ownership or state control of industry. Understanding socialism as a kind of emancipation, as liberation, has not only become counterintuitive, but seems perverse or contrarian. Have we truly lost sight of the struggle for socialist freedom? If so, when did this happen, and why?
Capital right now is too big to fail. We cannot imagine a situation where we would shut down the flow of capital, because if we shut down the flow of capital, 80% of the world's population would immediately starve, would be rendered immobile, would not be able to reproduce themselves in very effective ways. So the kind of fantasy that you might have had, or socialists or communists and so on might have had back in 1850, which is that, well, okay, we can destroy this capitalist system and we can build something entirely different. That is an impossibility right now. Capital in general is too big to fail. It is too dominant, it is too necessary to us, that we cannot allow it to fail. We have to actually spend some time propping it up, trying to reorganize it, and maybe shift it around very slowly and over time to a different configuration. But a revolutionary overthrow of this capitalist economic system is not anything that's conceivable at the present time. It will not happen, and it cannot happen, and we have to make sure that it does not happen.
These comments from David Harvey spurred vociferous criticism from several quarters of the Marxist left. In the Marxist publication The Monthly Review, for instance, a writer named George Martin argued that Harvey's comments, made in the context and as a reaction to the uprisings in Ecuador, Chile, Lebanon, and France, and today we could include the United States as another site of unrest, underestimated the role of the working class in radical politics. Harvey was abandoning a central claim of Marxism. The pervasiveness of capitalist relations should not be thought of as a block to revolutionary struggle. Rather, the orthodox position would be that the expansion of capital sets the table for revolution, as the expansion only increases the power of workers. Capitalism creates and expands the working class, and by doing so, it creates its own gravediggers. Harvey seemed to have forgotten that capitalist relations, from a Marxist perspective, create the conditions for their own abolition. He is working from within a Marxist tradition that no longer holds with this assumption, and in this video, we'll explore why this assumption that our socialism must be a socialism without a revolutionary working class has taken hold. Hello, Zer0 Books readers and viewers. It's me again, Douglas Lane. And in this video, I'll take excerpts from William Briggs' Removing the Stalin Stain in order to explain why Marx didn't conceive of revolution as requiring the complete destruction of capitalism and the replacement of it with something new, but rather as a change achieved through continuity, and why this idea that we do have to destroy what is before we can create socialism is so prevalent today. If you enjoy these videos, you should click on the subscribe button and hit that bell. Even better, you might consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to all of our podcasts, including 2 new series, one on Rosa Luxemburg's Reform and Revolution, and the other on the communizer Gilles Dauvé and his book From Crisis to Communization. Starting in August, we'll also be introducing a monthly podcast series on Trotsky and the Russian Revolution for patrons. Support us on Patreon and join us in learning critical theory with the aim of changing society. In William Briggs' upcoming book, Removing the Stalin Stain, Briggs quotes from Frederick Engels' Socialism, Utopian or Scientific. Engels wrote, "The materialist conception of history starts from the proposition that the production of the means to support human life is the basis of all social structures. The societies we live in, their norms, institutions, cultural products, class divisions, and attendant inequities are all the result of the way we organize to produce and reproduce our world. Further, the changes we see in our society are the result of how our own productive activity changes, how it acts upon itself. We reproduce ourselves and our world, but by doing so, we alter the world. We attempt to perfect our approach to production, become more efficient, and by doing this, we create new problems and new needs. These new needs lead to new productive activities, new conceptions, and new relations. This dialectical process of self-transformation is easiest to see at the level of technology. Improvements to the steam engine led to the creation of the steam turbine, which could generate electricity. The proliferation of electric power led to the extension of production past daylight hours, as well as to the proliferation of electric tools used in manufacturing and in communication. On the level of our personal relationships and self-conceptions, the development of industrial power expanded the need for workers and transformed the sort of work that was needed. The mechanization of manufacturing led to a decreased need for manual labor, and this change in the nature of the work that was needed for efficient production contributed to the abolition of slavery and to the introduction of women and children into the factories. The history of capitalist development is defined by the power of innovation based on increased efficiency. Capitalism's dynamism, its tendency towards self-transformation, was an incredible progressive force in the world. What was most liberating, most exciting about capitalism was how it flattened out differences based on old forms of production. Rather than a world peopled with a plurality of social roles and fixed caste positions, capitalism was creating a class society. It was simplifying the way we conceived of and organized ourselves. Rather than kings, dukes, earls, barons, serfs, peasants, and slaves, society under capitalism could be understood as a society with essentially 2 class positions: workers and bosses, proletariat and bourgeoisie. The Marxist idea was that, just as a steam engine led to the development of the tools and technologies that would replace it, the class society that was foundational for capitalism's development would lead to the creation of the social relationships that would replace it. By converting the mass of mankind into a proletariat class, capitalism was creating a social force that would eliminate class. As Briggs put it in his book, The Stalin Stain, Marx's conception of the development of class relations is one whereby the working class seeks to consciously promote and struggle for its own interests. And what is in the interest of the working class is its own abolition or replacement. Difficulty that arises within this approach to Marxism is alienation or separation. It is much easier to perfect and then replace technologies and products, but under capitalism, the changes to our social relations tend to take place behind our backs and mysteriously. Our struggles to directly change our relationships between one another are mediated through a productive process, through an economy which seems to be objective, separate, and out of our control. As Marx put it in Capital, the relations connecting the labor of one individual with that of the rest appear not as direct social relations between individuals at work, but as what they really are: material relations between persons and social relations between things. What is worse, this indirectness, this separation, is part of the reason our world can appear to be orderly and regular. The aim of the working class is self-abolition, but that can't be conceived of as just getting rid of work or getting rid of workers. Rather, just as in the case of the steam engine, some new category, some new sort of relation must be created. This is why David Harvey is so frightened by insurrections. Movements that aim only to topple what is are not sufficient. Likewise, Marxist projects that imagine that the aim should be to eliminate the separation between people, that conceive of a classless society as one in which we are in direct conscious control of every productive act and every moment of distribution, are misguided. Some new formal relation, some social aim, must be created, and according to Marxist doctrine, this creation will be accomplished through a political rather than a strictly scientific act. The revolution can't just be conceived of as a feat of engineering. It will not arrive through technological advances alone, but will have to include the seizure of social power away from the propertied classes. This means that unlike the sort of transformations that take place through commodity production, this sort of radical change won't be automatic, but will require the working classes to organize themselves and to act. And yet, by a strictly materialist accounting of revolution, the tools, the political tools, that will be taken up by the workers must arise from capitalism itself. During Marx's time, during the struggles against kings and queens, the aristocracy, the old feudalism, during the days of the First and Second Internationals, this didn't seem to present a problem. Workers' parties organizing across international boundaries were as much of a product of capitalist relations as Lyle's Golden Syrup or Harding and Howell and Company. Communism was a specter haunting Europe well before American consumerism was ruining the landscape. In the 19th century, most of Europe, about half the population, were farmers and could provide for themselves, while 25% of the workers in England were farmers. Marx and his socialist comrades surely imagined that before the majority of the world's population relied on a wage to survive, socialism would already have been accomplished. But today, only 2% of Americans are farmers, and around 4% of Europeans are employed in agriculture. And revolutionary socialism has migrated from the trade unions and political parties to university lecture halls and YouTube. In the era of smartphones and Uber Eats, revolution presents a bootstrap problem. Our current world does not seem to be producing the institutions and tools we need in order to overcome class relations. And the working class appears to be placated. The crisis in Marxism, the way in which economic crises no longer seem to guarantee militant working class action, has been around for about as long as Coca-Cola. In Marx's day, the split between determinism and voluntarism was not so apparent. That is, a split between the idea that capitalism would produce its way to its own dissolution and the idea that a trained vanguard party would need to lead the political struggle were not seen as contradictory. Whereas today, we spin wildly about, looking beyond the realm of production and exchange for a way out. And neither economic determinism nor vanguard volunteerism appear as real options. In 1957, Guy Debord founded the Situationist International with a pamphlet entitled Report on the Construction of Situations. In it, he wrote, "Our era is characterized by the lagging of revolutionary political action behind the development of modern possibilities of production. Modern possibilities of production which call for a more advanced organization of the world." So even in 1957, this split or problem between the need for socialism based on how advanced our technology had become, the possibility for socialism based on that advanced technology, and the political movement for socialism was already present. The situationists, they believe that the primary obstacles to overcoming the social relations that define capitalism were cultural or ideological. They wanted to intervene through the creation of situations, through the production of theory and practice. They wanted to both reject art and to realize it as a revolutionary activity. Since the 70s, it's been clear that the situationists were defeated, but it has only been over the last decade or so that the Anglophone Marxists have turned back to politics, if only in a social democratic form. After Sanders and Corbyn, it seems that some new political movement, some new attempt to overcome the gap between voluntarism and determinism, between tailism and obscurity, is needed. And that's what we'll take up in our next video as we examine the party form and its history. Thanks for watching this Zer0 Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zer0 Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zer0 Books book club and help us to continue making online content from the left.